My God, why don't you just disappear?" Those words hit me harder than I expected. They didn't come from a stranger or a rude passerby. They came from my daughter-in-law, Rachel. Her voice was sharp, her finger pointing at the front door of the very house I helped them buy. And beside her stood my son, my only child, arms folded, nodding in agreement. "We'd be better off without you," he said. He didn't yell. He didn't curse. But the weight of those 8 words collapsed something inside me. I didn't cry. Not in front of them. I simply reached for my purse, glanced one last time at the photographs lining their hallway, and walked out. I had babysat their kids every weekend, cooked meals when they were sick, and brought champagne to celebrate their smallest wins. That house had once felt like a second home. Now, I wasn't welcome in it. The spring air outside was cool against my face. I walked to my car slowly, as if my body was waiting for my mind to catch up. I was 73 years old, and had just been told I was disposable. My hands trembled as I started the engine. Driving home was a blur. I passed familiar intersections without noticing the lights. I couldn't stop replaying their words. Had they always thought this? During every Sunday dinner? Every Christmas morning? Had they been waiting for me to vanish? I pulled into the driveway of my old Victorian home on Maple Street. The porch light I'd left unwelcomed me, unaware that the woman returning was no longer the same one who left that morning. That was the day everything I thought I knew about family shattered. Inside my house, everything was exactly where I'd left it, and yet nothing felt the same. I set my purse on the hallway bench and stood in silence. The ticking of the grandfather clock echoed louder than usual, filling the space where laughter and conversation used to live. Along the walls were photographs from a life I once believed was full of meaning. David's graduation, the twins' christening, Rachel and David's wedding. I had been central to those moments, essential even. When did I become an afterthought? I wandered into the living room and sat on the edge of the couch, not really sitting, just resting on the edge like someone unsure if they should stay. I stared at the cold fireplace. For years, I had imagined that someday David and Rachel would inherit this house. They talked about it often, casually, like it was a given. I never objected. I thought love and effort came with legacy. I was wrong. I climbed the stairs slowly, pausing at the top where David's bedroom door still had a faded baseball sticker he'd put up when he was 12. I opened the door and took a step inside. The bed was neatly made, just as I'd left it after his last visit. The room smelled faintly of the lavender sachets I'd always tucked into the drawers. When his father died, David and I had become a team. I went to every baseball game, helped with every science project, stayed up to help with college essays. We were close in a way only a mother and son could be after loss. But somewhere along the way, that closeness had slipped into distance, and now it had broken into silence. This wasn't just grief over a moment. It was grief over a relationship slowly erased, one boundary at a time. Rachel didn't hate me. At least I don't think she did. But she didn't want me woven too tightly into their lives. At first it was subtle. The way she corrected how I folded the children's clothes. The awkward silence when I offered snacks that weren't organic enough. Comments about the twins' bedtime, their screen time, their after-school activities. "We've got it handled," she'd say with a polite smile that never reached her eyes. So I adjusted. I stopped dropping by unannounced. I reduced my visits from 3 times a week to 1. I stopped bringing gifts unless I asked first. I cleared my schedule around their family events, made sure I wasn't in the way. I tried. God knows I tried. But it never seemed to be enough. Then came the casserole dish, a seemingly minor thing, a hand-painted ceramic my grandmother had passed down to me. Rachel borrowed it for some dinner party with her colleagues and never returned it. I needed it for a church potluck and casually mentioned it during a visit. "Oh, I still have it somewhere," she said, eyes glued to her laptop. "I'll find it eventually." I said I needed it by tomorrow. She looked up and something in her face shifted. Annoyance turned into something sharper. "You're overstepping," she snapped. "You always do." The room went quiet. Over a dish? It wasn't the dish, of course. It was everything behind it. Every time I had unknowingly stepped over an invisible line. Every time I had acted like I still mattered more than I did. Rachel stood, arms crossed. "You undermine us as parents. Remember Christmas. The educational tablet we specifically told you we were getting for the twins? And then you showed up with the exact same thing." I blinked, stunned. I hadn't known. No one had told me. "Because I hadn't asked," she said. And just like that, I became the problem they had silently been collecting grievances against for years. After that confrontation, I stopped eating. Not because I was punishing myself, but because food tasted like dust. I sat in my reading chair by the window as the neighborhood lights flickered on, one house at a time. Behind those windows, families gathered for dinner. Children were bathed and tucked in. Conversations were had, laughter echoed. In my house, there was only the steady ticking of the grandfather clock. My phone stayed silent. No message from David, no call from the twins asking when I'd visit next. No apology, no acknowledgement. It was as if I had been quietly erased. I tried to make excuses when others asked. At church, when Mrs. Abernethy from the garden club said, "We miss seeing your family at Sunday dinner," I just smiled and changed the subject. "The twins have swim meets," I lied. "David's got a big project at work." Each lie tasted more bitter than the last. At night, memories ambushed me. David's first steps across this very living room floor. His loud teenage band practices in the basement. His graduation party under the backyard fairy lights. So many moments, some joyful, some chaotic, all filled with love. What had changed? Had I changed? Had I held on too tightly? Had I expected too much? Or had they simply grown tired of needing me, now that I was no longer necessary? There's a particular kind of pain in being forgotten by the very people you built your world around. I still set the table for one. I still bought the same kind of tea the twins liked. I still left the porch light on, as if somehow that tiny glow might guide them back. But deep down, I was beginning to understand. They weren't coming. I didn't decide to sell the house in a burst of anger. It happened gradually, like fog lifting. One quiet morning, I looked around the kitchen sunlight falling on countertops that hadn't hosted family breakfasts in months and whispered aloud, "I want to live before I die." That same week, I scheduled a meeting with Richard, an old acquaintance from church who now worked in real estate and financial planning. He was kind, measured, and respectful. When I told him I was considering selling the house, he looked surprised. "But you've lived there for over 50 years, he said. "It's been my anchor," I replied. "But maybe now, it's my chain." We talked for hours. About market values, about investment portfolios, about what it would mean to liquidate the one asset I had always assumed would pass to David. He asked me twice if I was sure. The truth? I wasn't. How could I be sure when I still slept in the room where David once came after nightmares? When the closet still smelled faintly of James's aftershave? When every tile, every dent in the wall held a memory? But I also wasn't sure I could survive staying, not in a house that echoed with absence. Not when every photo frame reminded me that I had once been needed. So I told Richard to find me a cash buyer, someone who wouldn't drag it out with endless inspections or sentimental hesitations. He raised an eyebrow. "You know they'll probably tear it down." I hesitated. The thought should have gutted me, but instead I felt something surprising. Relief. Let them tear it down. Let them build something new. Let the past make room for something that hadn't yet been imagined. I nodded slowly. "Tell them I accept." And for the first time in years, I didn't feel stuck. I felt free. The check cleared 3 days later. The number on the deposit slip looked surreal generous, more than I expected. Richard had already scheduled meetings with a financial advisor, a real estate agent, and an estate planner. Suddenly, my empty calendar filled with appointments and possibilities. I gave myself 3 weeks to pack. 3 weeks to dismantle a lifetime. I started with the easy rooms, the guest bathroom, the laundry room, the hall closet. I sorted each drawer and shelf into piles: keep, donate, discard. It was methodical, almost soothing. Each decision was a quiet exercise in reclaiming control. Then came the harder spaces. David's childhood room. The master bedroom I'd once shared with James. The living room where we'd lit fires on cold nights and played board games with the twins. I moved slowly, touching each object as if it could speak. A sweater James had worn. A drawing David had made in first grade. A cracked mug from a trip to Vermont. All these things once meant something. Some still did. I wrapped the china carefully. The set had belonged to my grandmother, elegant white with delicate silver trim. I labeled the box, Family Collection. I didn't know if anyone would want it. I wasn't even sure who counted as family anymore. But still, I packed it with care. The photographs were the hardest. images of a life that had changed form more than once. First, it was the three of us. Then, just David and me. Later, David and Rachel, then the twins. I couldn't keep them all. My new place would be smaller, but I couldn't throw them away either. So I spent an entire afternoon selecting and sorting. I created 3 photo albums, one for David, one for the twins, and one for me. I scanned the rest, saved them digitally. As the house emptied, it felt larger, somehow its echoes sharper, its memories louder. I was no longer just saying goodbye to a building. I was saying goodbye to a version of myself. I told Richard the first wanted to live near the ocean. Not on a grand estate or in some luxury high-rise, just something manageable, peaceful, beautiful in a quiet way. We visited 5 properties before I founded a modest 2-bedroom condo in a small building right on the coast. The living room had floor-to-ceiling windows that framed the endless stretch of sea and sky. A tiny balcony overlooked the dunes, just big enough for a table, 2 chairs, and a morning cup of coffee. "This is it," I whispered, stepping onto the balcony as salt air filled my lungs. I didn't bring much with me, only what mattered: the photo albums, James's pocket watch, my grandmother's rocking chair, a few keepsakes from my garden. Everything else was new, intentionally chosen, not inherited or expected. A soft seafoam green sofa, white and blue linens, framed coastal art on the walls. My dining table now seated 4, not 8. It no longer needed to stretch for holiday crowds that never came. On my first night there, I sat outside watching the stars appear over the water. The waves rolled in, steady and calm. The ocean didn't ask anything of me. It simply existed and let me exist too. There were no grandchildren asking for snacks, no family plans to navigate, no silent judgment hanging in the air. Only me, the tide, and the distant hum of possibility. My phone stayed quiet. No text from Rachel. No check-in from David. No blurry video call from the twins showing me their latest art project. Did they even know I had moved? Did they care? It didn't matter, not the way it used to. Their silence no longer broke me. It became part of the transformation. Learning to exist without needing to be needed. And for the first time in decades, I wasn't waiting for someone to invite me into their life. I was finally living my own. It was the middle of a Tuesday when my phone finally lit up. "David!" A missed call. Then another. Then a text, short and urgent. "Mom, what have you done? We need to talk. Please call me." My heart skipped, then steadied. I could have ignored him. Part of me wanted to, let him feel what I had felt, the emptiness, the silence. But another part, the part that still remembered him as the boy who used to crawl into my bed after nightmares, picked up the phone. He answered on the first ring. "Mom," he said, breathless and angry. "Mrs. Peterson said there's a construction crew at your house." "Your house? What is going on?" "It's not my house anymore," I said quietly. Silence. "Then, you sold it?" "Yes." "You didn't tell us." "You didn't ask." That afternoon, they came to see me. David looked shell-shocked. Rachel was tight-lipped, her expression unreadable. "We stopped by the house," she said. "The new owner said you moved out weeks ago. Where are you living?" "Here," I said simply, gesturing around the airy condo. David frowned. "You hate the beach. You always said the sand gets everywhere." "Did I?" I sipped my coffee. "Maybe I said that when your father preferred the mountains. Then you preferred city trips. Maybe I forgot what I liked." Rachel crossed her arms. "You blindsided us." "No," I said. "You just weren't paying attention." They exchanged glances. "We were planning around that house," David said eventually. "It was part of our long-term financial planning." "Your financial planning included my death?" I asked, not unkindly. David flinched. "That sounds terrible." "How else should I put it?" They had no answer, just silence, and in that silence, the truth filled the room. "You valued what I could leave behind more than who I am now." Rachel looked down. David looked away. For the first time in a long time, I looked both of them in the eyes and didn't flinch. I didn't owe them anything. Not anymore. 2 months passed. Not much was said after that day, but something had shifted. We didn't go back to how things were. We couldn't, but we found something else, something quieter, more honest. Sunday dinners resumed, but this time they took place at my condo. Sometimes I cooked. Sometimes we ordered takeout. I set the table for 5, not 8. There were no grand centerpieces or matching place cards, just food, conversation, and an effort to reconnect. I offered to babysit once a week Wednesdays from 2 to 6, my schedule, my choice. No more last-minute calls or assumptions that I'd always be available. I went to the twins' soccer games and school plays, but not every practice or project. I showed up when it mattered, not out of guilt, but because I wanted to. Rachel began to thaw. Slowly, she too started painting again, just small watercolor pieces, mostly landscapes. "It gives me something that's mine," she said one afternoon, as we sipped tea on my balcony. "I'm glad," I told her. "Emma's watching, you know. Everything you do, she's learning from." She nodded, her eyes softening. "That's what scares me." We didn't talk about the past, not directly, but there was a new tone between us. Not quite friendship, not quite forgiveness, a truce perhaps, a fragile bridge we both crossed carefully. There were still moments when Rachel bristled if I declined to help over school break, or when David looked wounded if I mentioned friends I'd made on my travels. But those moments no longer defined us. They passed like waves against the shore. The twins adapted quickly. Children often do. To them, Grandma now lived by the ocean and made the best grilled cheese sandwiches in town. They didn't care about inheritance or history. They just cared that I was there and smiling. It wasn't the family I once imagined. But it was real. And it was enough. I turned 74 on a plane bound for Paris. It was a trip I never thought I'd take, not because I couldn't afford it, but because I had convinced myself the world was no longer for me. That travel, adventure, discovery, those were for the young, for the brave, for people without responsibilities. But I was wrong. In Montmartre, I climbed the long steps slowly, pausing often to catch my breath, but refusing offers of assistance. At the top, I sat beside a street artist who sketched my portrait in charcoal. He said, "You have interesting eyes," like someone who's seen great change. He had no idea. My phone buzzed as he shaded the final lines. "A message from David, Sunday dinner still on when you get back. The twins have a surprise for you." I smiled and typed back, "Wouldn't miss it. I have surprises too." It's strange how silence once felt like abandonment, and now feels like peace. How letting go of what I thought was permanent, open space for what's real. The healing hasn't been perfect. There are still moments when old habits tug at my sleeve, but it's honest. Earned. Lived. David once told me, "You seem happier now." "I am," I said, "because of everything that happened, not in spite of it." Boundaries saved me, travel reminded me, solitude taught me, and through it all, I became someone new. Not just a mother, not just a grandmother, but a woman. A woman who sold the house they expected to inherit and instead claimed the life they never imagined she'd dare to live. If you're watching this and you've ever felt forgotten, discarded, or used, remember, you are not what they expect of you. You are what you choose to become. And if this story spoke to your heart, don't forget to like, share, and leave a comment below. Maybe your voice, like mine, is what someone else needs to hear today. This is my story. Finally mine.